So what we're going to do now is we're going to simplify and multiply at the same time. So we're going to start with our radical. And the first thing I'm going to do is anything that's on the outside, I'm going to write together. So 5 times 3. Then anything on the inside of the radical, I'm going to write numbers first, and I'm going to multiply them. So I'm going to have the cube root of negative 12 times 18. Then I'm going to do the cube root of a and a squared, so that's going to be a cubed. I'm going to do the cube root of b 4 times 2, which would be b6. So now let's do each part. So this will be 15. And if you multiply negative 12 times 18, 12 times 8, see here, negative 12 times 18, and do the cube root of that. Negative 216. That's the cube root, and hit enter. We're going to get a negative 6. So this part right here, if you do it in your calculator, we'll get a negative 6. On letters, you just divide the exponents. So 3 divided by 3 is a, so we have an a. 3 divided into 6 is 2, so we have b squared. And so there's nothing left over. So this, if we multiply 15 times negative 6, 15 times negative 6, I'm going to get a negative 90 a b squared. So I multiplied and simplified all at the same time. All right, so adding and subtracting is a little bit more difficult because the radicals must be exactly the same before we can add anything, and they're not the same. So what we have to do is simplify first. So if I simplify radical 8, I get 2 radical 2, and so I get 4, and then I get 2 radical 2, which then combines to 8 radical 2. So there is this part. And if I do the other part, so I go radical 50, I get 5 radical 2, so I have a 3, and then I have a 5 radical 2, and if I multiply that, I get 15 radical 2. So if you simplify, you usually end up with the same exact radical sign, then you can add. The radical 2 does not change when we're adding, and you just add the 8 and the 15, which is 23. So adding, you have to have the same radical to be able to add, and you only add the numbers on the outside. So let's do our next one. Radical 98 is 7 radical 2. So this one is 7 radical 2. And then we're going to subtract radical 32. So I go 32 is 4 radical 2 times 2. So it's 8 radical 2. And I can now subtract, which gives me a negative. And then you can write the 1 if you want to, or just write negative radical 2. Okay, now we're going to do multiplying where we have binomials, in a sense, a plus sign and a minus sign. So we can't just multiply, we're going to FOIL it. So I'm going to take this first, and I'm going to go multiply it by this first one. So 4 times 3 is 12, and radical 3 times radical 2 is radical 6. Then I'm going to multiply it by the outside. So 4 times negative 6 is a negative 24, and radical 3. Then I'm going to do the inside, so radical 5 times 3 radical 2 is plus 15 radical 4. And then I'm going to multiply it by the last one, so that's going to be a negative 30 radical 2. So what happens is we've multiplied, but now we have to combine the same radicals. So to do that, I'm going to simplify my radicals. So my radical 6, this does not change, and there's no other radical 6's, so 12 radical 6 stays the same. The radical 24 with 3, there's none, so minus 24 radical 3. But radical 4 is a 2, and 2 times 15 is 30. And I'll put that at the end, but I'll have my minus 30 radical 2 plus 30. So really, you can't do anything but simplify this one part. Nothing can be added or subtracted together because none of them are alike terms. So this would be our answer after we multiply. Now the most difficult thing to do is conjugate a denominator, because you can't have a radical in the denominator. So to conjugate a all we're going to do is we're going to multiply by whatever you see here on the denominator, but you're going to change the sign. And you have to do the same thing on the top. So radical 5 plus 1, because we have a radical 5 minus 1. So if I do the numerator, 2 times radical 5 is 2 radical 5. And 2 times 1 is 2. So there's my numerator, but my denominator, this is the magic of it. This is 5. And then when you multiply this and this, you get a minus 1. And so we end up with a 4. And so 2 radical 5 plus 2 will be over 4. And that is simplified for the most part. But we can cancel out. So if we want to cancel out each fraction, because the 4 is under each number, we end up with this cancels the 2, so we have 5 radical over 2 plus 1/2. And so we can actually cancel out numbers when they can be simplified.